Today's episode of Market Talk is brought to you by GrowMark FS. Keeping up on the latest in ag is a challenge to say the least, but there are experts nearby ready to help. You'll find them at your local FS. You can trust them to bring you customized agronomic, grain, and energy solutions born of the latest thinking. That's because FS specialists receive continuous training that keeps them current on the latest trends, practices, and technologies. So you'll get local expertise that's both exceptional and up to date. Visit fssystem.com to learn how FS is bringing you what's next. And good afternoon. Welcome into Market Talk here on this Monday, June 6th. Great to have you with us. Thanks for making us part of your day. I am your host, Jesse Allen. Find us online, markettalkag.com. That is our home on the web. That's where you could find all of our streaming sources, radio affiliates, and much more, markettalkag.com. Well, as we take a look at the market trade here today, wheat came back from the weekend screaming higher with corn following. The soy complex was fairly quiet and firm as we work through Monday's session. Cattle and hogs lower. Lots to talk about. Let's bring in today's analyst, our good friend Matt Bennett with agmarket.net. Matt, good to have you on with us, sir. Great to have you back on the show. And what a way to start the week with this wheat market just screaming higher today, Matt.
Yeah, it's interesting. You look at corn and wheat higher. Last week, of course, we had some pressure on the markets. Everyone said, hey, this export market's going to open up out of Ukraine. Russia's going to allow all of this wheat and corn to get exported, and there's a whole bunch of neat hoops you were going to have to jump through. It's easy to say, hey, we're going to go let these supplies go. But then whenever you say, well, we have to have sanctions lifted first, and then we got to demine the ports, and we got to do all this and do all that, and so I guess between you and I, Jesse, you come in here over the weekend, you bomb the crap out of one of the ports, what do you think's going on here? Well, call me skeptical, but I got to think someone knew that they darn sure weren't going to allow a whole lot of anything to be exported for the time being, and that the market would probably react if they said that it was going to get exported. And so, I think there's a lot of, misinformation that kind of floats around out here. And I'm afraid that there are people who are taking advantage of what that information's power possesses. And so, as a producer, I'll tell you what, you probably don't have any more challenging time to figure out the markets. But what a beauty we have in seeing the prices that we have, because these prices give you a little bit of leeway and flexibility. And quite frankly, if you don't make money on a year with prices like this, then you haven't been able to, at least pay attention and at least lock in some worst case scenarios, because there's so many opportunities.
Very true. And I will say I have been on the skeptical side of this Ukraine grain corridor since I first heard about it. So seeing the market drop heavily last week made me kind of shake my head, and it felt like, as you mentioned, some of that misinformation, some of those algos, those computer traders really kind of latched onto that and drove the markets down, quart of wheat especially. And then, like you said, seeing those pictures on social media coming back here over the weekend, moving us higher. With wheat, though, obviously, we're also watching weather concerns with spring wheats and with winter wheat still kind of going through its growing phase in the southern plains. I know we're going to get crop progress numbers this afternoon. One has to wonder what we'll see for not only winter wheat condition, but also how many acres are still left to plant or potentially going to go unplanted in the northern plains, Matt.
Yeah, so, a couple things. The last thing you just said, I think there's going to be some acreage that you're going to struggle to get it planted. I do know that there was a lot of talk there for a couple weeks, the last couple weeks, in fact, that producers were hunting down a little bit extra seed in places where they're able to run. They want to plant a little bit more spring wheat. So I do think spring wheat acres, they may not quite hit the goal, but at the same time, I think you're going to have decent spring wheat acreage. But the other thing is those southern plains that you're also referencing. I don't know that any amount of good weather is going to really resuscitate that crop. Sometimes when you push a crop over the brink, you just can't quite get it to come back. These genetics, absolutely phenomenal, and we've seen beans before that we thought were deader than a doornail, come back and make 40, 50 bushel, like in 2012, for instance. And I'll tell you, genetics have made some big advancements since 2012. So, you've got to hope that maybe that crop is at least salvageable to where they have a few bushels to sell, but there's no question that some of it's going to be permanently ruined. So, there's a lot of question marks here. I think one of the interesting things for me today, I don't want to switch gears too much, but, the corn condition ratings will be very interesting. And I was thinking about tweeting something about this, but I didn't know how to explain it. And here's how I'm going to explain it to you. I think that where the corn is excellent, it's flat out excellent. I mean, like right in here in Central Illinois, it just looks unbelievable. I do think there's a lot of corn that doesn't look excellent, though. I mean, a lot of folks got a later start, a lot of cold, wet conditions later on into the spring than what we're typically used to. And so anybody who thinks we're going to come out of the gate with a 70% good to excellent or push an all-time record high, I got to disagree with you. Now, who knows what the number is going to be, but boy, I think that'd be really pushing the envelope here this year. So, but again, the first thing I said, don't forget that there is some corn here, in parts of the Midwest. It's not just where I'm at, but I've talked to a lot of folks that have told me in different places it's the best looking corn crop they've ever had at this stage of the game. So if that's the case, you just need a little bit of help from Mother Nature throughout the rest of the summer, and you could have areas, pockets, if you will, where you're setting some records on yield, and that certainly would be conducive towards at least getting up there close to that 177 or overtaking it this year, because that's what we need to see happen.
Very true. And that was something I was going to bring up was emergence issues. And we've seen some emergence issues in parts of the country, as you've alluded to, and then some spots where it is very good. So, I look at this market and I look at us in corn trying to hold out to sevens here on the futures trade, hearing great cash basis across parts of the country for corn and beans. So if I look at these markets here on June 6th, Matt, and I look at the potential risks to the upside or downside, what am I doing here as a producer looking at corn?
One thing I'll say is the market feels heavy to me as far as it seems like it's taken more news to kind of get us rejuvenated, and to go towards the other. I mean, shoot, you could sneeze 3, 4, 5 weeks ago and the market was going to go up 10 cents, right? But then last week, I mean, it just felt awful heavy. Yes, you come in here on Monday, corn market strong, bean market's able to hold on some gains while we're talking, wheat market strong. But, you look at corn and you think we were actually well above $8 at one time, and now you're sitting here trying to get back to $7.50. So, I guess the way I'll explain it is this. The base has been strong. Basis has been really strong for both old crop corn and old crop beans. We're in a pretty tight situation. Every time the market's gone down, you've seen basis, respond. But you got to be careful, because if the market would go down $1 for corn, I'm not saying it will, but if it would, you're not going to get $1 appreciation in basis most likely. And so, I think that you do run the risk when you get into this time of year that if, let's just say, you sit on your hands through pollination and the acreage report, that's when you're really susceptible. So, I'd like to see people maybe get some of their risk quantified over the next 2 to 3 weeks before that acreage number. I don't think it's going to be wildly bearish, but at the same time, if it's wildly bearish, if condition ratings are really good at that point in the game and the forecast looks good, then your chances for better cash prices are going to be slim and none. Now, beans is a different story. I mean, we may run out of beans for all I know. This bean situation is as tight as a banjo string, and I don't think that you're going to see that alleviate. Whenever we saw some of the surprise announcements last week, export sales are going to be good once again this week, and we're already over what the USDA goal was. So this Friday's report is going to be very interesting. Where are they going to come in at, for carryout? And I'll tell you, Jesse, we couldn't keep our number above 200. When Ag Market was putting the number together, we know that we might end up being on the low side, and that's okay, because we feel like the true number, is well below 200 at this stage of the game. And anybody paying attention, that certainly impacts your new crop carryout as well. So I'm not going to say I'm wildly bullish beans. I'm just saying there's not going to be a whole lot of them out there.
Well, looking at the soy complex on Monday, it just didn't feel like there was really any fresh news out there, and that might have been the reason why we were just fairly quiet after the open. We kind of pulled back off the overnight highs.
Yeah, absolutely. So overnight you're trading well above $17. You come back under 17, you trade both sides unchanged. Once you get back under 17, you stop and think about it though. You've got to have someone who really wants the beans to buy them above $17. And so, but interestingly, over the last week to 10 days, there's been a fair amount of cash beans sold, especially on some of your river ports for over $18. And so, as a producer, I've had people call me quite a bit lately. What do you think about going ahead and selling beans? Because they've read, for instance, my newsletter that I said they're going to be a hot commodity. I said, how do you argue with $18 beans, let alone 17 or even 16, quite frankly? The thing is, though, is do I want to hold on to some gambling bushels just to see how this thing transpires? I mean, anybody who says that they're not a gambler and they're farming, those two things don't mix. We're all gambling to an extent. So, I want to see how it turns out. But I don't want to risk the farm on it. I do want to get down to maybe gambling type stocks. I mean, if $17, above $17 isn't good enough for you, then I think that fear and greed factor is kind of working on you a little too hard.
Well, and I think about it as well. We still have some growers who are trying to finish up their planting as well here on June 6th. And, it's been a busy time. And I would think just across all these markets, we've alluded to the volatility and trying to trade in here. And just have to think how tough it is for some guys and gals to really trade and work, not only to get a crop in the ground, but keep an eye on this market action as well, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a chore, and so I think that's what I was kind of saying early on whenever we first got started is, this is an extremely hard time to figure out the markets. I mean, it's never easy. If it was easy, then we'd all be retired on a beach somewhere, and, this is a tough thing that you're dealing with this year. There's so many different moving parts and factors that go into the marketing of, for instance, corn and beans as we talk about them. But as a producer, if you can't make money with beans at $15.33, then we've got some bigger issues that we probably need to talk about. You look at December corn above $7, and I've talked about this before. I mean, there's been many years we'd have given anything for $4 corn. Now, yes, our expenses are higher for this crop. We all know that. But if we are truthful about it and we run the math on it, you're making one heck of a lot more money at $7 corn, even with extravagantly higher fertilizer prices than what we made whenever we were selling corn for $3.50 and low input prices. So there's a lot of good things that go along with it, but you're right. This is a tough environment. Partnering with somebody, there's so many good people in this industry. I always say, I'm friends with all my competition because quite frankly, there's enough business to go around. There's a whole lot of good folks in the industry and there's a whole lot of good producers. But sometimes one of the best things we can do, whether it's farming or other parts of life, is to admit that we might need a little bit of help in some areas because it helps us be better at the areas that we are naturally gifted at to begin with.
Matt, let's touch on this livestock market real quick as well. Pretty rough day, down day, led kind of by the hog market and feeder cattle, it appeared as well. I would have to think some of the higher corn and wheat prices was probably one of the biggest factors today because it didn't seem like there was much else out there to really latch onto.
Yeah, anytime you've got your feed stocks higher, there's no question that you're going to struggle whenever it comes to feeders. You're going to struggle probably when it comes to hogs. Here's the thing, though, and I've talked with you about this some, and I don't know when everything's going to transpire. Last week, we were starting to show the promise in this cattle market, especially whenever you see some folks saying that feed costs have maybe peaked for the time being. It's almost like this trying to hold a beach ball underwater. Feeder cattle, for instance, have got this massive fund short that has been there for a time. And the thing is, Jesse, is that whenever you go to the sale barn or whenever you go to a guy's farm or a gal's farm and you want to buy $171 feeders, they're going to laugh at you. They're going to say, good luck with that, son. And the bottom line is whenever you're looking at fats as well, $132, if you're a buyer, good luck with that too, because that's not what you're doing at the sale barn or at the packing plant. Anybody who's taking them in is getting significantly more than that. And so, the cash market is leading the futures, tells me demand is strong. And I think that if you do raise a normal size crop this year, Jesse, and let's just say, or maybe fireworks in between, but these feed costs at least are alleviated somewhat. I'll tell you, feeders and fats, in my opinion, are going to be really, really good property, especially given the numbers that we've got in the third, fourth quarter into the first quarter of next year. It could be really an interesting market.
Very true. Matt, as well, stocks and energy is fairly quiet today. So if you have any thoughts there or any other final thoughts, love to hear them on this Monday.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, my main thoughts, every time I get up in the morning, of course, I look at a couple of things whenever you bring up stocks, energies. I mean, obviously, what's the crude oil market doing? We all need to be keeping an eye on, for instance, heating oil. What's our diesel fuel prices looking like? And nat gas. I mean, quite frankly, I'll tell you what, the crop went in the ground late, and that tells me there's going to be a lot of corn dried this fall, if we don't end up getting a really hot summer. And that's obviously what we don't want to see. So we're all going to be kind of at the mercy of this nat gas propane situation. Keep an eye on those things. Keep an eye on what are the equities doing? What's the money flow situation? Because, if you see a lot of money flowing back into equities, there's a chance that money is not going to be flowing into commodities at the same time. And so, but the final point, as always, is going to be, we have really good prices on hand, whether you're talking 22 or 23. We are actually looking towards the 23 market. You've got these 23 at 630 in that neighborhood. Fertilizers backed off lately, and I don't know how much you've seen on this, but we've heard a lot of folks paying under $1,000 for anhydrous. Now, you can't contract that for the fall, but the trend has been lower, and so that means the ratio is really working in your favor. If you're going to sell some fall corn for this next 23, I'll tell you what, lock in some of your fertilizer at the same time if you get that opportunity. There are some great opportunities here, not only for 22, but for 23, both corn and beans. Pay close attention and be willing to manage some of that risk.
Well, Matt, if producers need some advice with their marketing, I know they can reach out to you and the team at agmarket.net very easily, can't they?
Agmarket.net, agmarket.app. You can get whatever info you want to chase down. So go to one of those places, get a hold of one of us, and we'd be glad to sit down and talk to you.
Matt Bennett with agmarket.net. Appreciate the time on Market Talk today, sir. Thanks so much. Have a great week.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Again, Matt Bennett with agmarket.net. That's going to do it for Market Talk on this Monday, June 6th. Find us online, markettalkag.com. I'm Jesse Allen. Have a great afternoon.